Fragments of silicon, statistically unlikely to be sued for a name by an energy drink.
All right. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is the regular crew. Forgive me if I seem a bit distracted. We've been dealing with some tech problems. Like, a lot more of those been cropping up lately than I care to have. But hopefully everything will go smoothly from here on out. Anyway, let's get to the news. Let's see. Petty, why don't you start us off this week?
Oh boy. Well, the big thing that happened is yesterday my mom had her shoulder surgery, so that's fun. So yeah, don't know how long she's not going to be able to drive and such. So this is gonna be an interesting few weeks.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Like.
And wait, go ahead.
No.
Let's see. Other than that, not a whole lot's been going on. Still been doing the Final Fantasy 14 stuff. I think I'm almost done with Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Like, it's telling me I'm basically, once I enter the, what's the dude?
Shinra headquarters?
Not Shinra headquarters, the, creepy dude.
Hojo?
Other creepy dude. The one where Cloud cross-dresses.
Oh, Don Corneo.
Yeah, once I enter his mansion again, it's telling me that's the point of no return, so...
Not quite, actually.
Well, it's telling me I can't go back to the slums.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing that's happening. And yeah, not a whole lot else is going on. It's been kind of cooling down, thankfully. But yeah, I guess next victim.
Twilight?
Yeah, not really much going on around here. That's really all that worthy of note. Though, weather's been cooling down, so that's been quite nice for the past few days. So that's an indication that fall is almost here. Let's see now. I'm going to be having to help a neighbor with her bring her home from getting her car worked on tomorrow after work, and taking her back down there. I think Saturday morning, I believe, and so she can get it. They get fixed. So that's gonna be a thing. No big deal for me. Let's see now. Just been doing some more fall related decor around here, and I've been playing one of the games for this weekend, and that's about it.
All right. Well, Gulix, it's your go.
Getting a little cooler around here too, which is nice. But honestly, this past week has just been super exhausting for me for I think mostly just worrying about stuff purposes. I have several friends out on the West Coast who are like not in immediate danger, but they are definitely in the really, really terrible air quality territory. And on top of all the other stuff. So
yeah,
that's pretty much. I've had very little energy for doing much this week so far because just been worried about things.
that is certainly understandable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Nothing much particularly new for video games this week, I don't think. My personal replay of Breath of the Wild, I just cleared the Rito Divine Beast yesterday. That's about it.
I guess it's my go then. The weather is still hot. Like, cold weather, it doesn't hit until like November. And it's still rainy, still very rainy. Like, right now we're less worried about fire and more about hurricanes.
Mm.
Yeah, that's also a factor.
Yeah, I mean, there are like 8 of them out in the Atlantic. Something like that.
Yeah.
That is that hasn't happened since like 1971, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, and I think it was Sally that hit New Orleans or Alabama, or like it hit somewhere on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, I think it's Sally right now.
So, that's a concern. And I suppose, let's see, in gaming, started up Alpha Protocol. Like, it's an interesting experience. I'll give it that. You know, this game was definitely bold in certain areas, constructed out of Weetabix and others. Not exactly new commentary, but there it is. Let's see. Oh, right. My brother is coming in on Sunday to pick up an old printer that he could use. It's like, and yeah, that's about it for my news. So, merrily, we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Jim McCann of, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this, Cheek.
Jeez. I feel like we should have resolved that before the show. Jeez. Huh. Oh well. Give it a shot. I'm excited.
TCHOW?
TCHOW.
TCHOW.
Yeah.
Mind you, I'm less concerned about mispronouncing company names than I am person names.
Okay, then McCann in that case.
Mm-hmm. TCHOW. Anyway, right. So how we like to start things off is we'd like to get to know the person behind the game, the studio, and what have you. And we do this by first asking this question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal level and a professional level?
Well, let's see. I think making video games is the sort of thing that I had always wanted to do, and I kept just failing to do it over and over again. And so I wound up in the place where I am now, where it is a fine hobby that I nurture as much as I can, but of course I have to have a day job at the same time.
We don't get as many game hobbyists as you might I'd expect as compared to people who actually do this full time in one sense or another.
Yeah, I was full time for about 2 years between I think it was like 2012 to 2014, something like that. Roundabouts 2013, I was full time for 2 years, and then I ran out of money. I think the story of being a very independent developer.
Yeah, that's a very familiar story. A very familiar one, indeed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can go into detail of what the indie studio was.
Oh, I was literally, I mean, I am still and was TCHOW LLC, a sole proprietorship in the fine state of Pennsylvania. And we made, and when I say we, I really mean me, 2 games, Rocket Car, which came out on Steam toward the end of that time. Didn't sell particularly well. It's an incredibly off-puttingly hard physics-based puzzle platformer. and also made a mobile game called Rainbow, which is actually a quite tame and fun little mobile thing where you steer rainbows around. That sold about, I don't know, 7,000 copies, which seems great, but then you realize it was $2, and that's about, I could probably live on that for a year, but it didn't really recoup investment, shall we say.
And after that, you...
Oh, I got a real job. I'm in a... So look, here's the thing about me. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, I knew I wanted to make video games, but I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do when I graduated from my undergraduate in computer science. And when I was an undergraduate, I interned at EA, and what everyone at EA said was, if you're going to make video games, do it independently while you're young, because you don't need the kind of stability that Electronic Arts can give you until you've got a family. Don't work for a big company until you actually need that kind of a steady paycheck. And so I had that kind of rattling around in my brain. And then I went off and essentially, for the price of burritos and a couch to crash on, interned at Chronic Logic, which made an excellent, which made an excellent game called Gish. And I got to hang out with them in Santa Cruz for a summer. It's sort of my penance for working at EA. And I was like, this seems like the sort of thing I would love to do. But I just, I didn't have the financial means to just start doing it. And so I did probably one of the least possibly responsible financial things I could, and went to grad school, which means that, many years later, around 2010, I exited grad school with a PhD, which means that when I say I went back to get a real job, what I actually mean is I got a research job, which are like the least real jobs in the world. The hours are incredibly irregular. It's super hard to ever put them down. And they're kind of all life-consuming, which is maybe was a mistake.
I don't think we could reason to judge that sort of thing kind of out of our wheelhouse. At any rate, so given that you've got a graduate job here, how do you balance that and make games on the side?
So I am really bad at balancing things. I basically tend to just go full throttle on one thing for a while and then say, okay, I've stored up some buffer or some credit or whatever I feel like that means. I'm going to do another thing for a while. And so things like the whole Cubedex series basically got made while I was working as a research scientist, by me basically more or less taking November and December off without exactly telling anyone. So a little bit shifty, shall we say, but it's a good way to stake out some time. And these are very, very flexible jobs.
I'm like, I hope that didn't lead to any friction.
So what would happen is there would be like really intense paper and project deadlines kind of coming right up into that period. And so everyone was exhausted. And so it was just really fragmented anyway. When you've been working 16 hours a day for a while, you feel like working 3 hours a day is maybe okay to do.
I can see the logic there. It's like 3 is a significantly smaller number than 16.
And it does, in some sense, average out. I ended up eventually leaving that job and getting a different not real job, which is the one I have right now, which is I'm actually a professor. I teach stuff. And that means I get 3 months off every year. I don't get paid during those months, mind you, but I don't have to work. So it seems like a good compromise for making games.
Fair enough, I suppose. Now, I suppose at this point we should get into the Cubedex series. Indeed, there are several of them, as I understand.
Yeah, I've heard claims that there were 5 or 6, and I think I've made both of those claims. I should really look it up and see what the real number is. Sounds of typing.
Yes.
Sounds of counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's 5. Confirmed.
Yes. And are all the Cubedex series, well, involving, for lack of a better term, a cube?
Yeah, they all definitely are cubes, except for the third one, which is a cube.
What is a Cubedex anyway?
Well, I will vehemently defend publicly that it is definitely a cube.
That is an interesting answer. And what was the kernel of inspiration that sparked the series in the first place?
Well, I happen to be lucky enough to have a younger brother, about 4 years younger than me. And when I was a child, I didn't really know what to get him as a midwinter gift, so I would make like a scavenger hunt. I'd give him like little notes, and he'd follow them around. And it kind of became a tradition over the years, ever more elaborate things going on in these scavenger hunts. And then when I was an undergraduate, got into sort of puzzle hunts, and I got my first and only Xbox from a Microsoft Puzzle Day, which for some incredibly lucky reason my team was able to win. Like, we had no idea what we're doing, but we stumbled through it. Like, we tripped over and fell into the answer almost literally. And that was kind of cool. And it really inspired me, and I started making these like more complicated puzzles. And then in 2015, my brother was doing a thing in Lausanne and did not have the spare cash to fly back to the States. And so I needed some sort of digital thing to send him. And that is the inspiration for the Cubedex of Brass and Wood. It was developed, or I should say the initial version. What you see on Steam is really quite different, but the initial version was developed as a midwinter present for my brother.
Like, now I think that's just the first time we've ever had somebody mention making a game as a gift. Did your brother like the game?
He said he liked it, and I think that for this kind of thing, it's probably best to take people at their word.
Good idea. All right, so that's the initial version of the Cubedex of Brass and Wood. What made you want to expand or rework or whatever enhancements you did to, this current version?
So are you familiar with the game Steven's Sausage Roll?
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay. Anyone else?
No, can't say I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell to me. Enlighten us.
Okay, this is probably one of the best, tile-based puzzle games, probably, maybe ever. Came out about the same time as The Witness. I actually like it a little bit more than The Witness as a puzzle game, although they're quite different. Mm-hmm. Think about it. It's so brilliant that when you describe it, it sounds really stupid. What the game is the developer, Increpare, or Stephen Lavelle, probably getting his last name wrong, took the concept of Sokoban, Warehouse Keeper, that right. Game Boy game where you pushed crates around onto dots. And he said, this is good, but let's replace the crates with sausages. And the sausages are 2 squares long, as opposed to being 1 square long like a crate. And when you push them along their circular axis, they roll. And now you have to, instead of putting them on targets, you have to cook both sides by pushing them onto grills, rolling them, pushing them onto other grills. And we're going to give the player a fork with which to push the sausages. And the fork just makes it. And I understand that sounds like a really stupid description of a game, but it's actually a really, really good puzzle game. It's one of these puzzle games where you get to a level and it's got like 5 things in it, and 45 minutes later you're like, okay, I'm taking a break. This is too much for me. And it's a tiny level. It's one of the. It's just the difficulty per tile is insane.
Yeah, I can. Having played Sokoban and Boxel and Chips Challenge and all that, I'm familiar with the game type, and that definitely sounds like an escalation of.
Oh, it is.
What is possible, since you're talking about manipulating 2 tiles at once.
Yep. And it's in 3D, and there can be stacks of sausages, and the sausages in the stacks roll in particular ways. And you can spear sausages on the fork, and there are so many mechanics that emerge from the simple addition and substitution that happened. But of course, you asked why I decided to release the Cubedex series, and I haven't quite answered that yet, but I'm getting to it. And the answer is Stephen Lavelle, who made Steven's Sausage Roll, happens to know a friend of mine, or to be acquainted with a friend of mine, and happens to live in Berlin. And I was invited, thanks to my day job, to give a talk in Berlin. And through our mutual acquaintance, I got to sit down with the developer of this game that I super loved. I mean, this is a game that was really just blew my mind with how great it was. And so I sat down with this guy, and of course, I'm just a complete fan. I'm like, wow, everything you make is amazing. And he's really humble about it. Of course, he's like, oh, whatever. And I'm like, I want to show you some of my games. I want to prove that there's some reason I'm worthy to talk to you. And he saw, I showed him a couple of these Cubedex games, and he was like, yeah, you should release these. So that was kind of, I mean, he probably says that about every game. That's fine. I took that to heart, and it gave me some inspiration and the push I needed. I kind of in the back of my mind said, it does seem kind of stupid to have spent, probably along the entire series, better part of a year making these things with deep levels of obsession and craft, and then have only one person ever play them.
Possibly. I mean, it might depend on how you feel about it. But
yep. I mean, part of the reworks is I have to take out like all the like familial in puzzles and stuff like that. I have to kind of like make it general audience.
Well, I mean, what would be an example of a familial puzzle?
Oh, stuff that like references, things that our parents have said or done, or like places in the house we grew up in, that sort of thing. I can't expect that average Steam users know that. And in fact, if they do, I probably should be worried.
Yeah, I think that's
extremely.
Yeah. Like, otherwise, we're getting into esoteric adventure game logic, where, if you're not in on the whole what you were thinking, what you're referencing here, you're not gonna get the puzzle. So probably best that was taken out.
Yep.
Now, in terms of the Steam version here, is this a combination of all of the previous Cubedex games?
Nope, this is just the first one. One of the things that you do in a puzzle hunt that I really like is you never tell the same joke multiple times. So you got this cube, you've got yourself, 6-ish activities. And each of them, I hope, doesn't outstay its welcome. So you got a bunch of different things to do. A lot of my test players said, I really want more things, more versions of each of these things, especially this little like assembly puzzle that we were seeing earlier. And so there are actually now variations of a bunch of them. Some of them don't have variations, like this light puzzle doesn't have any variations because I didn't feel like there was much satisfying one could do with a different variation. And that's one of the things I added for Steam, is just to try to be a little bit more complete.
Mm-hmm. And before we get more into this particular game, what sort of puzzles do the other Cubedex games feature?
It's interesting. I tend to think of puzzles as kind of falling into 3-ish categories. Mm-hmm. So you've got like your encoding decoding puzzle, where you kind of have to look at something that contains a message and sort of ask yourself, like, how does this contain the message? Are the tree leaves spelling out something in semaphore, or is the blinking light doing something in binary? That's kind of an encoding decoding puzzle. You've got your kind of engineering puzzle, where you gotta get a car, you gotta build a bridge across a river, or get a car through a maze or something like that. I really loved these when I was doing puzzle hunts in person, because we would actually pull out some building toy we'd used as kids, like a Connect set or something, and say like, okay, you got to build an arch that goes over the couch with this Connect set for some reason. Tried to capture that a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also like there's also sort of performance puzzles, which are kind of like building puzzles, but instead of sort of making something that does a task for you, you have to do the task yourself. So drive a car, or like pilot a helicopter, that kind of thing. In person, performance puzzles would often involve like a little remote controlled vehicle, or like doing something in a video game. And here I kind of think like this mirror puzzle that was just getting played with is kind of a performance puzzle, because you do have to aim that light beam pretty precisely. And so when I'm putting these things together, I try to mix in flavors of each of these kind of puzzle categories.
And so how much do these puzzles here resemble, outside of like the family in jokes, the puzzles of the original version?
So the actually almost unchanged, except for some really important quality of life improvements. So I keep coming back to the light puzzle, but like the light puzzle in the original one, okay, just to say for people who are listening to this, this is a puzzle where there's a maze of mirrors and you're directing a light beam through it. In the Steam version, whenever your light beam hits a pillar between two mirrors, you can press a button on the top of the pillar to cause the mirrors to raise and lower. In the original version, whenever your light beam hit a pillar between two mirrors, the mirrors would raise or lower, which meant you had to be on point and very fine motor control on this thing, or it would just, you'd be 1 degree away from the solution, you'd twitch the wrong way, and all the mirrors would go up and down and just ruin your day. I can do that to my brother. He's up for that kind of challenge. The frustration is part of the game. I can't do that to an arbitrary player. That's just mean. And then I actually tweaked the internal mechanics of a few of the other puzzles, and I can't really go into how I tweaked them without revealing the solutions. But suffice it to say, they're solved in different ways than they were in the original.
Okay. And so how long did it take you to make this new version of Cubedex of brass and wood?
Let's see. So for reference, I think the original took me sort of a month of maybe paying less attention to my real job than I should have. And this polish pass took me probably 2, maybe 3 months. I was doing it all of this summer, had it out to playtesters, getting feedback, tweaking things, adding things, trying to make, this is, by the way, the first 2 Cubedex games are both in Unity, and they're in Unity 5, which is 3 or 4 years old, 5 years old at this point. And so there's a little bit of just like making sure this thing will still run okay as well. Thankfully, not too much of that, but it stole some days that I could have used for other stuff.
Right. And now getting to the brass and wood part of the title, is there any particular significance other than, that does appear to be what the Cubedex is made out of?
You've gotten it in one, as they say. No crazy hidden meaning in the title. It's just like, I'm not super confident in my 3D modeling skills to convey that those things are brass and wood, so I figure if I put it in the title, I'll clue you all in.
Makes sense. And now, is this a pure puzzle game, or is there any sort of story or narrative? Like, is there a particular reason you're trying to break into the Cubedex? Is there the meaning of life located inside the Cubedex, that kind of thing?
So it's got sort of, as well, I would say it has as much story as like Myst, but I also skipped all of the video in Myst. So I think there is actually a story in that game. I just never knew what it was. Um, so no, it doesn't particularly have a strong story. It's more of a thematic thing. You're some sort of disembodied ego. Obviously, you're floating about, and you've got to kind of solve your way through this thing, and then at the end something happens, and you find yourself in the next game, and then that theme continues throughout the whole main arc of the Cubedex series. The side arc games are actually a little bit more story driven. Cube Ship is a complete outlier in that the thing actually has a story. It also happens on a cube. Yeah, which it makes it really quite unique in the Cubedex games.
No doubt. I'm like, and how hard would you say these puzzles are, especially in relation to the other Cubedex games? Like, is this a good entry point to the Cubedex series?
It is. It very much is. I just for like points of reference, my expected solve time for this is the sort of thing people would pick up and do in an afternoon, or maybe an afternoon or two. You solve faster with friends. When people who are actually good at puzzle games play this thing, they solve in like a couple of hours, and it just surprises the heck out of me.
Like people
no,
who can,
go ahead.
Yeah, like people who can manipulate a Rubik's Cube in a matter of minutes or seconds.
Yeah. The people who are like, oh yeah, I didn't bother thinking about that puzzle. I just pulled out, my heavyweight theorem prover, logic enumerator thing and threw the clues in, and it did it for me. Because I just do these things all the time. I know how to do that kind of thing. I wrote a program to solve it because it was faster, people. So, Cubedex of Brass and Wood is on my puzzle difficulty level. I call this one mild. So, the next one, Cubedex of Boxes and Lines, which is it'll probably have a demo out in October, I think. That's spicy. That might even be the hardest of the series. And then from then on out, the series kind of settles into sort of medium, and medium spicy going through it.
And are you planning on reworking all of the Cubedex games to Steam?
I would like to get them all on Steam. The amount of reworking will vary per game. Like Cubedex of Boxes and Lines, it has stuff in it that is quite good. It has a couple of puzzles I'm going to have to change just to be not sort of in puzzles. But the puzzle formats in it are very much, they would be hard to even do variations of. Like every puzzle in the Cubedex of Boxes and Lines is a thing, like it's an arcade cabinet. It's pretending to be a classic game. You have to approach it and say like, wait, I know this is not a classic game. I know this is a puzzle, but why is it a puzzle? And you have to figure out why it's a puzzle and then sort of play the game in order to solve the puzzle way. But it's sort of unclear how you would make a bunch of variations of each game in that one. So it's probably going to be about
okay,
the same
this is
formats.
Space Invaders, but the solution isn't actually just to play Space Invaders. It's actually to blow up all of the crab enemies.
Yeah, something like that. We're like, oh, it's Space Invaders, but yeah, I noticed the crabs are blinking in a particular pattern, or like when they explode, some weird sound effect plays. I think I can do something with that.
And how long do you think it'll take to get Box and Lines onto Steam?
I am trying to get it within the year. It turns out that this semester has really hit me quite hard in my professoring capacity. So unless that lightens up, I may slip to the next year.
Like, yeah, that sounds about right for this hell year.
Yeah, you'd think when all the students just you just have to write something up they can read asynchronously and then answer their questions during the lecture. You'd think that would be much easier. It turns out that I've talked to a lot of my colleagues about this. A lot of us get by with kind of improvising through classes, and you can't do that when you're writing it all down.
That is unfortunate. Anyway, so after you get, potentially all of the current Cubedex games onto Steam, any plans to make like a brand new one?
Well, I've made one every year for the past 5 years, but my brother is back in the United States. So, in theory, I could just go back to hiding notes around our parents' house when we go visit in the holidays. I might do that. It might be nice to take a break. I actually have a different puzzle game I've been working on for longer than this series that still needs to get done. So my game efforts may go to that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that would certainly be understandable. I mean, 5 games in 5 years, not including a reworking of said games, is quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they're not big games. That's
No.
clear. But it's always more work than I think it'll be. I look at the thing, I think, it's perfect. I get it after the first round of test players, and I realize, it's not perfect at all.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I will never hear from a video game designer. This was easier than I thought it would be.
I think you need to check their head if they say that.
Like, that is the most consistent answer we've had on this program. But anyway, right, I'll see if my colleagues have any further questions for you here.
Have you ever considered doing a hypercube dex of cubes and cubes?
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, the Cubedexes are definitely cubes, and I will always say that in public.
And not in public?
Oh, no.
I mean,
No comment.
we're in public,
No
so
comment.
we can't say it.
Yes. Very good.
I just think hypercubes are funny.
Anyway, anything else, Golix?
Not really.
All right. Anyone else?
I'm good.
I think I'm good.
All right then. So I think that'll about wrap.
Son.
Yeah, I think that'll about wrap it up for the here and now, at least. Though we might have you back on the program when more of these Cubedex games hit Steam.
I'd love to do it.
Indeed. But in the meantime, the game is the Cubedex of Brass and Wood. It is available on Steam. Is it Windows only, or is it on multiple computer platforms?
Windows, Mac, and Linux. I actually develop on Linux, so I try to make sure that the Linux ports of things actually work pretty good.
Very good, very good. Always good to hear that the alternate computer platforms are supported. Anyway, but it's retailing for $4.99. Be sure to pick it up today. Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. And indeed, the topic to be discussed is the next generation. As all of the cards have finally been pulled down, and we know what things are going to be, and such.
Unless Nintendo throws a curveball.
Sony and Microsoft have finally released all the system information, the pricing information, the game information, and that sort of thing.
I think the only thing would be is if Nintendo throws a curveball and gives us a 4K Switch, like rumors say.
I think, I'm trying to remember if Microsoft's entire launch lineup is solidified yet. I know they ran into a bit of trouble because Halo Infinite got delayed.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, we know what Microsoft and Sony are doing. All of their consoles are releasing in the major territories this fall.
Mm-hmm.
And we know they will. They're both going to have 2 SKUs, though Sony and Microsoft are actually taking radically different approaches. I suppose that it coincides with, honestly, this upcoming generation feels like the first time in a long time that Microsoft and Sony feel significantly different in their approaches and methodologies to what they're doing conceptually with their consoles.
Yeah, Microsoft's going power, 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 and Sony's more, hey, we got exclusives.
Sort of, but that I'm getting at more. Microsoft is emphasizing cloud gaming a lot more than Sony. I'm like, that really seems to be Microsoft's centerpiece this upcoming generation. It's really not all about the Game Pass, but a huge portion of their plans are around the Game Pass, and that is just centered in the console plans here. Because, we have the Xbox Series X, the Microsoft Sexbox. Hey, it's their naming convention.
Yeah, I know.
But
can you call it a convention if they just keep putting random letters after the thing?
No, it's just the combination they particularly went with this time. Is there's really not a good way to combine it.
Well, it's like, and it's also, keep in mind, the Xbox One got shortened to the Xbone almost immediately.
And the Xbox One S all digital has become the Xbox SAD.
Right. So the naming convention continues. But anyway, the Series X is going to be, that's the powerhouse. That's going to retail for $500 American. And just as an aside to both Microsoft and Sony, dollars are not euros, and they are not fucking pounds. I'm like, saying
euros are also not pounds, although I'm not sure what the exact ratio is there, since the pound has not been quite so strong since Britain decided to take their ball and go home.
The point is, okay, these consoles are retailing for $500 and 500 euros. That is a problem. And the pricing scheme goes all the way fucking down too.
Mm-hmm.
No,
they cost like 50 less pounds than euros.
The point is,
but yeah, it's not a big enough difference. Yes.
Yeah. No, the point is, dollars and euros do not convert 1 to 1. That, doing this pricing structure means that the games, the consoles, and the accessories are actually significantly more expensive elsewhere, because you're trying to do a 1-to-1 conversion rate to something that doesn't convert 1 to 1.
Yeah, like it's one thing if it's like a $10 thing, it's like, sure, whatever. But this is like a difference of a few $100s.
Because, to give a really good example, okay, so Sony is going not whole hog on the next gen pricing, but they're definitely they're definitely investing in the $70 as the baseline. I mean, some of their, like, Sackboy and Miles Morales, these are still $50 base edition. But, other games like the Demon Souls remake, going to be $70. And that $70 is converting into $90 Canadian, like 80 euros or something like that.
Oh, the video game inflation is real.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So, and again, the thing, as has been said, the issue is less that they're increasing the price. Because, yes, I get that the price is not increased. It's that they came up with a whole bunch of ways to increase the price without increasing the prices. And call me a fake psychic, but I'm glancing through my mind's eye on the horizon, and I do not actually predict any significant decreases in the amounts of additional monetization that they're planning on doing.
Okay, that's not so much with Sony, because honestly, out of, like, Sony, they're not really known for the microtransaction race for the most part. They're not completely absolved, like the Gran Turismo series can attest to. But the point is, like, the next God of War game probably not going to have going to be riddled with microtransactions, or Horizon's Shattered Horizon, or whatever they're calling it.
It's usually a bigger issue with with third-party games.
Yeah, and
but still.
Looking at UEA.
Yeah, like, though it's also 2K is trying this with the next NBA 2K game. Activision, I think, is doing this with the Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. The thing, like, we don't know if Microsoft is going to go for $70, but my intuition says no, because they're not real. Like, their concern isn't the physical, the pricing of the single games. They're more about the Game Pass. Keep in mind, they're giving out their latest games ostensibly, quote unquote, for free on Game Pass.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft's plan is to get you onto the Game Pass.
That's a good point. These consoles do both have all digital versions, pretty much, or at least almost all digital for the Series S, which will potentially increase sales by making it so that you can't do resales really.
Yeah, I only own video games, as many as I do, because I could buy them at half price and below from GameStop before they closed.
I mean, it's been trending this way for a while, unfortunately. The PC, they barely make PCs these days with optical drives.
To my chagrin.
My current one that I built doesn't have one. I'm
on my second non-optical drive PC here. I install my OS off of the USB stick and don't think about it.
Yep.
I've actually been trying to look into one for a few purposes, mostly like playing DVDs or whatever. But
yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, the reason you're probably going to still want like the disc-based versions of these games or these consoles is because the fucking size of games.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the next Call of Duty game is going to be like 150 gigs, and
something like that.
The all digital versions better come with at least options for beefy freaking hard drives.
Yeah, or like external drives or something you can plug in, because that's like most of your console feels like.
Yeah. Well, once again, the Xbox Series S, I think, is going to have like 250 gigs or something like that. Like,
yeah.
Like 2 games.
Okay, once again,
2 games.
Once again, okay, the focus of the Series S, this is to get on Game Pass.
Stuff, which, also, there's one problem with streaming, which is that you might have noticed that the broadband infrastructure in this nation is not particularly up to what you would call the gold standard.
I'm not exactly sure what the gold standard is in that field, but
probably South Korea.
It's like I think with Game Pass, it's not just XCloud. I want to say you can download.
Yeah, it's mostly download. Actually, I think XCloud is a separate service on its own.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
I mean, Game Pass is basically the reincarnation of GameTap.
Yeah, but still, if you're Game Passing games, you still have to download them at least to some extent while you're playing them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I'm saying that's a better solution than going full Stadia.
Yeah. No one needs that latency.
So, so the Series S is basically your Game Pass box. It's if you're buying that, you're probably gonna want to invest in Game Pass and EA Play, because that's about all this is good for.
I wouldn't be shocked if it came with a trial for Game Pass too, because duh.
Yeah. So And as far as Sony goes, well, they're a bit more flat. You know, they just got the all digital version and the disc version, and it's $100 difference. And people are wondering if a disc drive is, you know, worth that amount. I mean, there's markup, no doubt, but I'm like, disc drives are expensive.
Especially a 4K Blu-ray drive.
Yeah, because the PlayStation 5 is going to play 4K Blu-rays. Granted, that's not the selling feature that it used to be with, like, the PlayStation 2 can play or the PlayStation 2 can play DVDs, and the PlayStation 3 can play Blu-rays. Like, physical media in general is just on a severe decline.
And this saddens me, but
Yeah.
It's especially relevant in this world where game sellers seem to be more and more, and they haven't really yet, but there's certainly the threats of invoking that you don't actually own the games. Just have a right to use them temporarily.
Scott Pilgrim, anyone at all?
Well, that's coming back.
I know it's coming back, but it's been gone for almost 10 years.
Yes.
That's something different. Like,
well, yeah, that was licensing things, but yeah, it's harder to take away a physical copy of a game.
Right.
Yeah, like I have a physical copy of Deadpool. I can throw that on PS4 and play it whenever I want. I can't go buy it from PSN now.
Well, yeah, the concern, like, that's been that's always going to be a concern in terms of digital stuff, but that's not exactly the same thing as what we're talking about in terms of the, I'm trying to remember the term, the first right or the first use, something along those lines, where, yeah, if you purchase something, you can do whatever the fuck you want with that particular copy. And that's been a big fight in the digital age, especially with, of all things, farming equipment.
God, yes.
But as much as I would love to delve into that particular conversation, that is a world away in other regards. But, you know, in the relevant portions, that's involving shit like DRM and remote detonation, basically, and, you know, why farmers are basically looking to purchase older tractors because they are not hooked up to the internet. You know, it's like you can't stop those tractors with an internet kill switch, that kind of thing. You know, it's not that drastic.
And you can repair them without having to literally be a hacker.
Right.
Yeah, right of repair is super important, and we need to have that more codified in this country.
Yeah, I'm like, but, you know, that's not, I think, the main play of what's going on here with this upcoming console generation. Not like it was like when we were with the start of this current one.
Yeah, when we were laughing at the Xbox One for, you know.
Yeah, when it looked like Microsoft was looking to lock out secondhand sales entirely. Before that just blew up entirely in their faces. It's more, yeah, the market has just naturally moved more towards digital, expedited by the pandemic year. Like, that being said, you're probably not going to get a 100% conversion rate with consoles. Like, hell, you don't even have that with PCs. You know, it's a lot closer, but it's not 100%. You know, and, you know, clearly there's still enough of a unconnected market for them to make discs for this generation. You know, is this the last generation that's going to be disc-based? We do not know that. It's just starting. Okay? But yeah, this current generation is the last one where the disc was the mainline option, let's say. Like, that being said, in terms of who has the better games, That's a bit hard to say.
Final Fantasy being exclusive is a little bit rough.
Not the only one that's doing that. I'm like a Final Fantasy game being exclusive to a PlayStation platform.
I'm not saying it's rare, but the last one wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, well, like it's fucking 1997 all over again.
Indeed.
Yeah. Like, but yeah, Final Fantasy 16. Clearly Square Enix is focusing on blockbuster games. Sony is focusing on this. Microsoft maybe less so. Like, it's more overall Game Pass, I think. Like, plus Microsoft, they're the ones who are honestly being a bit more bold in terms of their IP for the next generation. Like, Microsoft has a lot more new, like genuinely new things in the pipeline than Sony does, which just sounds weird. I'm like, that's not, and it's not to say that Sony isn't doing interesting things with some of their upcoming games, like the next Ratchet and Clank. And I guess Demon Souls. The things that are more taking advantage of the PlayStation 5 versus like Miles Morales, which is a cross-gen game. Cross-gen games are always going to be kind of limited by the fact that they were built or they are built for older technology. They got to hit that older technology. And while you're going to be able to give like a resolution boost or a frame rate boost, it's like in terms of like having new effects and all that stuff, that's going to be limited by older hardware, just how the game is played, so to speak. Anyway, also the pricing for the DualSense controller has been revealed. $60. Like,
I mean, that's what a DualShock 4 is running, so...
Yeah, so shockingly not more expensive, but once again, it's 60 euros as well. Can you seriously stop doing this? Like, it's not... That means it's what? However, the conversion rate is, like 70? Ugh.
I think it's less than a set of Joy-Cons, which Joy-Cons do have a lot of tech in them, but I think the DualSense does too, so...
Yeah, it has the haptic controllers now, so...
Mm-hmm. As far as which one is going to do better this holiday, honestly, I'd have to give it to Microsoft, if only because, as much as we like to mock the Series S, that's got affordability.
Especially if they can get, the infrastructure for xCloud stuff good, where it's, not a total shit show like Stadia.
I mean, Sony, Sony's not so much, they're not repeating the $599 US debacle, but they are nickel and diming you into expense, with, you got to buy the accessories. I think the headphones are like $30.
Yeah, but those first party stuff is usually pretty expensive. And right. You don't need them.
Yeah, headphones are usually at least safe to get like a third-party one if you want to.
Right, but there's probably not going to be any third-party stuff at launch.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the controllers have a 3.5mm headphone jack, so you can just literally plug in any headphones you want.
No, point is, with games going up to $70, that might not be too much of a, I don't know how normalized this is going to be. But then again, $60 has been mentioned. $60 hasn't exactly been the price of games for a while, between collector's editions, deluxe editions, insane editions that contain a whole bunch of stuff.
Editions that don't even have the game.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Ubisoft.
Seriously, how does that happen? Like, here's
stupidity.
Yeah, here's a bunch of game-related shit, but you don't have the game. It doesn't even have to be a disc, a code. Because once again, like, we are in the digital times, so not having a disc, especially over here, like, discs are still more common in Europe and Japan. Like, I think that's another thing that's going to keep the disc drive around in consoles. Especially from a Japanese company, because Japanese consumers still like physical media a lot more than we do, or European consumers. Like, they still make
interesting for Japan, because they traditionally have way less space.
Japan has its interesting quirks, like they won't let the fax machine die.
There's an interesting story on the fax machine specifically, and it involves the fact that the Japanese system of house addresses is completely ridiculous.
Duly noted. But my point...
Like, you know how in the US your address is like number street? In Japan, it's like the number of the block in the neighborhood.
Right.
And the buildings are numbered in the order that they were built. Not like any spatial relationship or anything. Yeah, so that's why fax got popular there in the first place, pretty much.
But the point of order is, we know what Microsoft and we know what Sony are doing for the holidays, and indeed we know what Nintendo is doing for the holidays. They don't have another system to launch this holiday. Like, we still don't know if the Switch Pro is going to be a thing, but presumably that is a tale for 2021. Anyway, so yeah, that'll about do it for the topic of discussion here, as well as indeed the episode itself. If you liked what you listened to here, be sure to click on the subscribe button, click the bell. Once again, you do all the things that you do to keep abreast of when the show gets broadcast, especially since, for whatever reason, Twitch took away the social features where it's like, oh, hey, I can just, push a button or two and, mention that the show's live on, the Twitter or the Facebook or what have you. So, it's more important than ever you click those things to keep abreast, which I think is the point in the first place. But anyway, coming up on the week ahead, we do have a Friday show. Friday, September 18th, we will be having Peter Petrov of PyDev Bulgaria on the program. We'll be talking about his upcoming game, Colorblend Fx, which is a Metroidvania style game. Going for an interesting art style. That is to say, it's a 3D model, but 2D, the 2.5D style, if you will. Puzzle platformer, and basically it's got the plot of the Blob. The colors of the world have been stolen, and it's your job to find them. So looks like an interesting game. We'll be talking about that on Friday. And on Sunday, we'll be having reviews on Hidden Animals English to Spanish. This is a hidden object game where you look for animals. And they have options for English, Spanish, and English to Spanish.
Find the abejo.
Indeed. The Suicide of Rachel Forrester, which is an adventure game, PlayStation 4. So Petty will be handling that. Bounty Battle, Nintendo Switch version. Basically, this is Smash Brothers, but with indie characters. And Room Number 9, the latest visual novel from Manga Gamer. If you recall, we did a interview about this game not too long ago. I'm like, I'm about 6 hours in. I think I'm on day 6. This game is exhausting if it's not in your wheelhouse, let's say. Like, oh, more on that on Sunday. And until then, I shall wish you good gaming.